Depression. They have a full discussion about depression. That's fascinating. Let's go to that first clip.
The thousands of people who have emailed me saying my doctor told me I was clinically depressed and it's a disease that I have got in my brain and I can't be fixed. And I started listening to you and I realized that that's not the case and I can fix my own life and you're the only person who has ever helped me. Thousands of people have emailed me that exact email.
If you think you are single-handedly curing people of clinical depression, you are living in cloud cuckoo land.
I am reading the emails of people who I have cured of clinical depression.
You're reading emails from people who have believed you when you say there isn't such a thing, and they've probably never been diagnosed clinically depressed. They just want to go along with what Andrew Tate says.
Okay. So how does Piers Morgan know that? What a ridiculous point to make. How do you know that the people who emailed Andrew Tate weren't diagnosed with clinical depression by a doctor? How do you know that? How do you know they had some infatuation with him? How do you know all of that? It's an awful lot of assumptions. Also, I didn't hear him say single-handedly. Because the way I interpreted what he says is that he encourages people to go to the gym, to get fit, go get that six-pack. I don't know what else he talks about. Maybe he talks about food, maybe he doesn't. But obviously, it's not Andrew Tate coming down like a god and saying, you're cured. It's him offering advice that then that person has to follow and empower themselves to make changes. So if that person doesn't go to the gym, doesn't lift the weights, doesn't get the endorphins running, doesn't make changes in their lifestyle, it's not going to happen. It's not like it's ridiculous. So there, of course, the whole nature of the message is a message of self-empowerment. You can have a messenger inspire you to do that, but ultimately you're doing the work. Andrew Tate's not doing the work for somebody else. He knows that. He doesn't want to do the work for you, and he doesn't think he should do the work for you. That is the whole point of the message. That is the whole point of the message. Hello. Okay. Let's carry on about depression. This is fascinating exchange. And by the way, exposes some of the distinctions between a society that absorbs what the medical establishment or the system says without question and those who question. Let's listen.
Massively overdiagnosed. I've already said that PTSD is a very real thing. I've already said
hang on.
Okay.
Again, you're misquoting me. I did not say clinical depression is massively overdiagnosed. I said that people who claim to be depressed but don't have clinical depression, I think that is massively overblown, right? In other words, there are a lot of people who just have a bad day and declare, I've got depression. Yeah. And I say, well, have you been to a doctor? Have you been clinically diagnosed? If you have, and you have clinical depression, that's one thing. But if you haven't, we could probably work on some mental strength and resilience skills with you. But a clinically depressed person has an absolutely proven medical condition that is beyond their control.
Not according to me and many others, my friend.
Well, okay, so this is a difference in worldview. That's all. But it's fascinating to me to listen to Piers Morgan. So what he's saying there is that if you go to a medical doctor and you complain about X, Y, and Z and you have symptoms and that medical doctor decides, yes, you have clinical depression, that you have it. End of story. So that physician is the be all and end all of everything. Interesting. You know how many medical doctors, by the way, when you walk in and you talk about feeling depressed, don't ask you things like, did you exercise this week? What did you eat? What are you consuming on a daily basis? Do you get sunlight? How much blue light exposure do you get in a day? How many hours of sleep do you get? How much stress is in your life? What's going on stress-wise? Are you in a relationship? Is it a healthy one? What's going on with that? Where do you live? Are you in a heavily polluted area? Like, what is your exposure to chemical toxins? None of those questions get asked. None of those potentially heavily contributing factors to how you feel get asked. But instead, you get handed a prescription. Oh, you feel depressed? Oh, it must be something that you have absolutely no control over at all in any respect. Here's some medication. So is that what everyone is just supposed to sign up for and trust? Now, there are people who will trust that. That's up to you. I'm all for freedom. You may love that dynamic of don't ask a lot of questions, just hand medication. Great, freedom, you do what you want. I prefer a dynamic where people look at your life, and I'm not saying, by the way, that clinical depression doesn't exist, and I'm not saying that there aren't depressed people, because I believe that there are people who feel depressed, absolutely. However, I also believe that there very well may be components in your own life that are contributing to that, over which you have control. You have control over things. You have control over what you eat. You have control over how much sunlight you get. You have control over most of the list that I just described. So why is that controversial? And why should somebody walk into a doctor's office who may not have an interest in any of those other things and simply accept their diagnosis and their medication? Well, there's a lot of people that just won't. So Andrew Tate is entitled to his opinion. You don't have to agree with it again. But by the way, the people who do believe in all those contributing factors and do believe that you have some control over how you feel to a degree will find it incredibly dangerous for the doctor to just hand out that medication. So when you throw out words like, oh, that's dangerous or this is dangerous, just make sure a lot of people feel like it goes both ways. So I thought this was a really interesting exchange because Piers Morgan seems to be representative in large part of the way the system operates. And you can see his tweets. That's why I brought them up about the COVID vaccine. We all knew that the vaccine didn't stop transmission, and that you had these little robots out here talking about, mandates. Why? There was no scientific justification for it whatsoever. And yet they parroted it. There were other people who questioned that, who wanted people to have the freedom to make the decisions for themselves and saw that there was no scientific justification for a mandate. So you're looking at a society where you have different types of people. And it's fascinating to me as someone who doesn't ascribe to the go to the doctor, get your medication, assume that everything is completely out of your control paradigm, that there are people who still support that completely within their right. But be careful about labeling somebody else as dangerous, because that can be awfully dangerous as well. Medication without explanation, treating symptoms without figuring out root cause, also incredibly dangerous. Okay, let's just hear his explanation on the final explanation on depression before we move on at 54.
54.
Yeah, isn't that where we are?
No, I went to 102.
Oh.
What do you have at 54?
54 to 54:30.
Okay.
Tyler gets a D. Just saying.
No, because you're
You
saying
hate being misquoted.
no. You're saying if people have clinical depression,
I never said
they
there's
have a
nothing to do
disease.
about it. They go to a doctor and they get diagnosed and they get help.
Then I would argue the point that if
It's the complete
somebody,
opposite of what you just said I said.
I would argue the point that if somebody has depression of any kind, whether it's clinical, whether it exists or not, whether they feel depressed or not, whatever, that taking control of their life, taking personal responsibility, and working hard is always going to be the positive, best thing they can possibly do for their life going forward.
How
and the people
positive
going
is
around
it?
them.
How-
So sitting here saying I don't believe in clinical depression, you don't believe in depression. No, I don't. I believe that people can take control and fight against things.
Right.
I believe in personal sovereignty.
Right.
Okay, so what's dangerous about what he's saying? You don't have to agree with it. You may be bothered. Oh, he said there's no such thing as depression. I don't feel that. I just told you I do believe that clinical depression exists, but I believe there are a number of factors that traditional medicine doctors don't take into account. And oftentimes when those things are tweaked, maybe you don't feel depressed. That's my opinion. I don't care if people don't like it. I don't care. Why is this guy not entitled to just say, no, his opinion is a danger to society? Oh, it wasn't a danger to society to suggest that unvaccinated people should be locked out of restaurants, clubs, footballs, gyms, jobs, etc. Piers Morgan, come on with this nonsense. Or do you just not like his opinion and want him to apologize for it and bow down at the altar of the system? Let's be honest. If you want to watch the full episode, you're going to click right here. And if you want to ask me a question one-on-one, you want to do a one-on-one FaceTime with a group of your friends, whatever you want, you need to download Connect right now. Click right here and let's get talking.